The biggest influence in a combat situation is what the players do.
You can do a lot of small decisions and they all matter.
With these capacitors, we're looking to give players that extra option to make the situation more dynamic. And the more dynamic that situation is, we're hoping the more dynamic the combat is.
A good combat experience should be the actions that the player can do in order to modify the outcome of a battle, but not doing in a way that feels gamey. A lot of our combat performance is based on equipment, which you set up very, very easily. Some of the decisions you do in combat are just simply based on, hey, am I overclocking my power plant or not? That is also not a very interesting choice. You do it once before combat, and that's it. You might just move your shield sectors around a bit, right? But the amount of decisions you really do during combat is very limited.
It's a very linear feeling to the combat. So at the moment, you're purely thinking about how you get your gun on your opponent. But we want that to be a very different approach now, where you're thinking about your gun, but then you've got to think about the time where you might have to, kind of outmaneuver them, or you might have to be in a defensive situation if they've managed to get their guns on you.
And then we were like, okay, how can we put in more interesting and more exciting decisions into that, right? And this brings us to the capacitor gameplay, which for us is a way to get very short and exciting bursts of gameplay.
It's about giving players the choice that they can make a difference. Imagine it as a pool of energy that you have. And this is extra energy. This isn't energy that the ship already has, it's an extra pool of energy on the ship. And then imagine that you can now choose where this energy goes. So if you need some extra thrust to kind of outmaneuver or escape a situation you're not happy in, you can move all the extra energy for a limited amount of time to the thrusters. And then they'll perform at a higher window, basically until the capacitor runs out.
These effects are drastic. These are really drastic. You cannot swap charges between, for example, guns to shields or something like that. That doesn't work. But you can tell each subsystem which should be preferred for regenerating. So instead of taping down your fire button, if you use energy weapons, you are now forced to pick when you're actually going to fire them, right? And these weapons, they will run out very, very fast.
And the players that can think ahead and manage that situation, we think they'll have the advantage in combat.
You need to strategically employ the limited resources you have.
So it isn't just about the flight of the ship, or it isn't just about one particular angle on the ship. It's about all these different things that come together to give a particular style of combat, which we want to be a positional combat situation.
And I'm very convinced that this is the interesting part where dogfighting will get really exciting again. In terms of where we are exactly right now is we almost have the archetype tunings for our four main fighter categories done. The next step is to make sure that the weapons fit in these categories and that we're getting the kill times and the maneuvering offsets into the place where we want them.
We don't want to kind of limit the ships enough where it doesn't feel like the ships are at a performance window. We want to keep that performance window where it feels like you're pushing the limits of yourself and you're pushing the limits of the ship. And that's something we're very keen to kind of keep, because we're kind of happy with that in terms of the current balance.
So it's a very complex undertaking. We want to do it right.
Now we have to do a lot more testing. We have to do a lot more balance. We're going to use what happens and look at the results, look at all the things the players are doing, look at the choices they're making, and make sure it's right, and make sure the balance is correct, and make sure all the differences between the ships align with our expectation of where they should be. It's going to be a feature that evolves over several releases for us.
Since their inception, our vehicle and player experience teams have worked to realize the full promise and potential of spaceflight and combat in both the Persistent Universe and Squadron 42. And this capacitor gameplay is just one more way they aim to put the ultimate fate of vehicle combat more solidly in your hands. But the work doesn't stop there. On our road to Invictus launch week, let's turn our attentions now to operator modes, what they are, how they'll serve as the foundation for multi-crew gameplay going forward, and how the next one that's currently in development looks to redefine the way we use missiles for a more engaging and tactical experience.
A key part of operator modes is to give the ship a purpose, that each seat has access to certain tools on the ship.
This is quite exciting because it can open up multi-crew quite significantly. It gives a lot of freedom to allow people to cooperate in different ways.
An operator mode, it basically allows us to split out a feature. So when you're in that seat, you get all the information that is on a particular task. And that's basically, what an operator mode is.
So operator modes that exist in the game right now are quantum drive, scanning is an operator mode.
And we've also got mining as well.
Looking forwards, certainly multi-crew is not quite where we want to be at the moment. And so we decided to manipulate operator modes a little bit and allow different people in different seats to be in different operator modes. So the co-pilot could be in, for example, scanning mode, while the pilot is in flight mode. This would allow the co-pilot to have control of all the scanning stuff, while the pilot doesn't have to worry about that, doesn't have control of those items, and can instead just worry about flight. So that's quite an exciting change for multi-crew going forward especially. So the operator mode we're working on at the moment is missile operator mode, which is the first new one that we're looking at.
The goal behind missile operator mode is to give players quick access to the missiles in combat, because there's a particular range and a particular time when missiles are the right tools to use in a situation in combat. And it was taking a lot of what we learned with the previous method with missiles to communicate that. The way that missile operator mode works right now is in a single pilot ship, you have the option to switch between your guns and then into missile operator mode and back out again. So you can't use both at the same time. But if you've got a multi-crew ship and you're in a pilot seat and you've got a co-pilot, you can use the guns and your co-pilot can have complete control over the missile system at the same time.
You can pre-select how many missiles you want to fire, lock them all on and then fire them all in a volley. That's quite fun to watch. Big anime blast of missiles as they fire off into the distance.
We're hopeful that we've given the players enough information that when they lock a target in missile operator mode, they understand that they've locked it, but then they also understand the next stages, which is how much of a lock do you have, and what are your chances of hitting your target at that particular time. And being in missile operator mode gives you all that information. So along with missile operator mode, we've also done a complete rework of the missiles, which now fly under an IFCS2 system, so they're very, very similar to the ships.
So for example, one of the big changes is missiles now have fuel. So as they maneuver more, as they accelerate, they will consume more fuel, which allows you to outrun them and outmaneuver them.
And they're going to have a very limited opportunity to come back at you if you manage to evade a missile.
We've also split up the missile's flight into 3 different phases. So the first phase is boost phase, where the missile is attempting to just pick up speed and get to top speed as fast as it can. Once the boost phase has expired, it goes into intercept phase, where the missile is trying to generally track towards the target, attempting to intercept it. And then when it gets even closer, it switches to full tracking, what we call terminal phase, where it puts all of its effort into trying to hit the target, because it's now pretty close. As far as where we're at right now, we're confident about it. We didn't rush it out last quarter. There were a few quality of life things that we wanted to make sure we had before we released.
We're a fairly small team, but I'm very proud of the efforts that we've done so far, and also our interaction with the community as well, because we are a player-facing team, because we're an experienced team. A big part of this for us is players understanding that the game's always moving forwards. We're always trying to improve everything we've ever done, and it's not going to stop.
So what did we learn this week? Well, we learned that in addition to the decisions you make before you take off, capacitor gameplay looks to add even more during the heat of battle. That operator modes are the next step in making true multi-crew gameplay a reality. And that for the missiles themselves, sure, you can use countermeasures, but it's going to be a lot more fun to just outfly them from now on. Now we're only a week away from Invictus. We're going to get to see the latest the various ship manufacturers of the verse have to offer and see the imposing UEE Navy fleet up close. Like, really up close. I'm excited. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. We'll see you all next week.